What is going on? Welcome back to the Jiu-Jitsu Outlet Podcast. I'm sitting down with Richard Bresler, the first American to ever train Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. A long time ago, you are also the author of the book Worth Defending: How Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Saved My Life. Right there in your hands, my friend. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a while since we've touched base. I just want to dive right into it because honestly, you were dropping some bombs before the interview, and I was like, man, I better just hit record because we were talking about recovery. We were talking about how jiu-jitsu has helped you with addiction. And I just want to dive right back into that, man. Can you share us a little bit about, how has jiu-jitsu helped your mental health, and how has it helped you specifically with stuff like addiction?
I think I have a very unique situation. I mean, not only did I want to change, but after I met Rorion in 1979, we became friends and I was a student, and I was still doing drugs, but he was such a role model that whenever I could, I would, the little things about diet and taking care of myself he was dropping little things in my brain. And then when we finally moved in together in October of 80, he just said, look, eat meals with me. First of all, I saw his attitude. I mean, here I was kind of down because doing drugs, on the flip side, you get pretty depressed when you're not high. So here I'm with Rorion, and he's always smiling, always laughing, especially when his family is around. They're always like around the table. It was just, and then he just said, eat meals with me. So it gave me something to focus on, starting to take care of myself. Still did the drugs, still, I lived with them and did the thing, but I was eating, I started taking care of myself. And without even knowing it, I was already had goals for myself to become healthier, because I wasn't specifically saying, oh, I got to start doing this. It's just, I just started doing this. And it wasn't until a couple years later when I met this brilliant therapist and started helping me focus on what I wanted. And so when you say, what do you want? And I want to be healthier, there's no room for drugs. If you want to be healthy, you have no room for drugs, or ideally junk food, because those are the things that they affect your brain. Whatever you put in your stomach hits your bloodstream, and your bloodstream feeds your brain. So if you're putting in junk, so the more junk, the more, so the drugs, junk, all that stuff screws up your brain. So I started changing, and then all of a sudden, I started meeting someone who helped me have goals. And those were my original goals to slowly stop. And, and then we were talking about what do you do after you start to do that? And then you indulge in your negative habit, your drugs or your junk food or whatever. How do you deal with that? And that's, how to keep your focus on your goal. And one of the things I said in the podcast yesterday that I did about recovery is I was really good friends with Rickson's ex-wife, Kim. And she used to do this therapy, something called rebirthing. And it was a breathing, a focused breathing thing that I did. And I went through about a dozen sessions with her. And she, after like the first or second one, she said, you need to focus on forgiveness. So she had me writing down 70 times a day, I, Richard, forgive. And took one person in my life and did it for a week. So I chose myself at first, and then I chose three other people. So at the end of a month, I wrote down, I, Richard, forgive. I, Richard, forgive. I, Richard, forgive. So when I started doing that, instead of beating myself up, which was the first natural thing, all of a sudden, this voice out of nowhere says, it's okay, Richard, I forgive you. Okay, what do we want again? Do this. And then all of a sudden I go, no, you idiot, I can't believe it. It's okay, Richard, I forgive you. And I have a little battle going back and forth where I just realized doesn't do you any good to beat yourself up. It makes you feel bad. So it all helped me. It was all focusing on helping me to recover and forgiving myself and loving myself. Because when you're doing junk food and when you're doing drugs, you can't tell me how much you love yourself. It just, if you say that, you're lying. So all those things help me to focus and help me to move on with the path and focus on what it is that I want and constantly going back to what I want.
I want to linger on this for just a second because I didn't realize that you lived with Rorion. I didn't realize that it was
For a
like
year.
at that level. How long were you living with him?
A year.
A year. Man,
I remember
that's
the
amazing.
first week that I moved in the house. I mean, the very first week that we moved in, his father, Helio Gracie, Rickson, and Carlos Gracie Jr. spent the week with us. I mean, here I have like, Grandmaster Helio Gracie in the bedroom next to me. And then Rorion, Rickson, and Carlos were sleeping on the living room floor in the other room. So, I mean, it was, I got classes with everybody and then living with Rorion. And so it really helped me solidify my eating habits because I had zero eating habits. I was running a fast food place. That was my business. And then I went from, serving hamburgers and hot dogs and started studying that later. And then I remember when we closed my business, I went over to help my dad. And when I was helping customers, I'd see my friends there and they'd order a hamburger and something and get a Coke. And I'd say, no, I'm going to make you something. And I go back, I had my juicer there and had some carrot celery juice or something. And I'd bring them. And my dad would say, Richard, you're not good for business. And I said, Dad, I don't care about the business. I care about the health, Dad. So I mean,
well, I'm glad you're in a different line of work now. I think it's a better one, better suited for you, man. That's amazing.
Being with, I was very uniquely, it definitely helped me having somebody who is setting down good habits for me and living with them.
I want to ask you this, just a little bit about their mindset, having spent so much time with them, especially back then when you kind of first met them, when you first met the Gracie family, what stood out to you about like the way that they were thinking or, their attitude, their mental side? Like, how did that compare versus the other people that were in your life? Was there anything that just struck you as like, oh, they've got this figured out?
Well, the one thing that really stuck out was the amount of confidence that just being in their energy, being around them. I mean, especially when I went to Brazil in 1981, I spent a week, I stayed with, you know who Jacaré is? Romero Cavalcante. He was good friends with Halls. So I spent the week with Romero and then I went over to Rickson's house because, I met Kim when she was pregnant with Hoxton. And so she spoke a little English. Rickson spoke zero English. And I went over to the house and she goes, look, why don't you two guys go to the store? And, and it was in the evening. In Brazil back in 1981, it's like, I just heard like there's a lot of criminal activity. But when I was walking down the street with Rickson, even though we couldn't really talk to each other because we didn't understand each other, I felt like I had a bodyguard with me and no one was going to mess with me, man, because Rickson Gracie was right next to me and he was like 19 years old and, arguably one of the toughest guys back then. So you're not messing with me. And when I was with Rorion, I just kind of, that thing about really having that kind of confidence that it's hard to put into words, but it was inspiring to be around somebody that had that kind of confidence.
You know, that's on this podcast, that's the one word that I would say always gets brought up is confidence. Like whenever I've been asking anyone, like what's the biggest thing you've taken away from jiu-jitsu, or, you know, if I ask a teacher, what's the biggest thing you see your students getting, it's always comes back to confidence. Like that just seems like when people find the martial arts, they're lacking in that. And you look around, like most people have zero confidence. Like if you go and just go to Walmart and look around, you can just read everyone's body language and tell like this person has confidence issues. It's easy. They're slouched over. They don't look people in the eye. They don't walk straight. Skin looks pale. Just if you go and see a lot of people, they don't look healthy. They don't look confident. They don't have that sort of thing. And I think that also what we're getting at here, when people talk about confidence, it's like, you know, there's an aura that you're describing. It's beyond confidence. It's almost like someone like Rickson Gracie, he walks around with almost this invincible aura. It's almost like beyond confidence. It's like
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
once you've been confident for your whole life, then it almost evolves into something even more profound. And just want to ask you, like, how have you seen this kind of play out in your life since then? Like ever since you kind of had this experience of living with the Gracies and being in that really in-depth environment, like how has that gone on to help your life off the mats?
If anything, one of the things that I've done, and I don't know if it's so much jujitsu or the other parts that have led me to, you know, learning breathing techniques. You know, one of the things that I did, even before I met Kim, I did, you know, the therapist was helping me because when I was doing drugs, and one of the drugs that I did was Valium for a short time. So one of the side effects of, and Valium is a drug that's used to help you relax, but one of the side effects of Valium is anxiety. So it perpetuates you using the drug again. So when I was coming down from that, I literally felt that I was coming out of my skin. I had to go look in the mirror to make sure, like, okay, you're still okay. I mean, it was the most bizarre experience. But one of the things that the therapist, he said, look, Richard, start doing 10-10-10 breathing. Inhale slowly for 10 through your nose, hold it for 10, exhale for 10. And I would start doing this. And that's the only thing that would calm me down. So when I get in traffic, I mean, almost every single time before I go teach, I spend at least 5 minutes minimum doing 10-10-10 breathing just to calm me down. Because LA traffic, you need to be calm. So all those things and the breathing have helped me to at least be able to reason things out, to slow my brain down, you know, because, you know, I'm constantly teaching, and these guys someone's attacking you and they're going crazy. How do you do this? How do you slow it down? And I just say, look, who's giving you a hard time? And so I go, come over here. And it's like, I don't put them away right away, especially when they're bigger. I said, but look, you don't see me like freaking out. So I said, I don't expect you to do this overnight. I'm just saying it's possible. So when you start to learn how to do that, you know, it helps everything. It carries over into your life. You know, like I told you before, I'm going through a decent amount of stress with my property. And, you know, have I had some bad moments? Hell yeah. But, you know, I would hate to see what it would have been like without this, without jujitsu, without the breathing, without a good diet. You know, it just, everything is there just to help at, you know, to a degree. So all I know is how I dealt with it before. And it's definitely a lot different. And I think diet alone can help with, diet. I mean, everything adds up. When you take the sugar, when you take the junk out, the quality of your thoughts. I mean, the way the thoughts that I used to have with doing drugs and doing junk, man, I mean, you don't know unless you try it for 30 days. Then you'll really start to like, wow, it's a change.
You know, you've talked about the importance of nutrition quite a bit on this interview so far. And I know that you spend a lot of time with alternative healing. Like, you don't just talk to people about jiu-jitsu, but you also specialize in nutrition and kind of alternative methods, right?
Yes.
I just want to ask you a little bit about that. Like, I guess let's start with this. Let's say there's someone listening to this and they're where you were at when you started. Maybe they're not addicted to drugs or anything like that, but let's say they're eating like crap. They know they're supposed to change. They just don't know where to start. Like, what would you tell to that person is just some easy things that they could do to kind of change their nutrition, change their life around from a nutrition perspective?
You know, I guess to start with, you know, at least have one meal a day that is a like whole foods, nothing out of a box, nothing out of a can. Go get some vegetables. You can go to the store and buy some broccoli. You can go to the store, you can buy, if you eat potatoes, you can go cook a potato. If you eat fish, you know, you get wild fish of some kind. You get grass-fed steak. You know, you don't have to eat like a celery stalk and a lettuce leaf and an avocado. I mean, just get something whole foods, and then have a goal. If you really want to change, put that down as write a affirmation. I'm a healthy person and I only eat foods that are good for my body. You don't have to go to the store and like look at a box of Cheerios or whatever junk cereal they have. Go, is this good for me? You know, intuitively, people know. When I first started changing my diet, people used to come up to me all the time and they'd be eating something really bad. And they go, I know this isn't good for me, but, and they keep eating it. You know, I know this isn't good for me. So in other words, so you know, but they don't really have, it hasn't set in where they really don't know. Because if they really knew what they were putting in their body was poisonous, which it is, they wouldn't eat it. So slowly make that change.
One of my favorite philosophers is a guy named Eliphas Levi, and he says that ignorance is the cause of all errors. And he says that no one voluntarily takes arsenic for wine. No one voluntarily poisons themselves. If they're poisoning themselves, they just don't know that they're consuming poison. And but it's true. And the more that I learn about this, someone I've been studying a lot, I want to try to get him on the show, is Pat Miletich. I don't know if you've been looking at what he's doing.
No, I haven't.
He's a former UFC champion, and he's gotten real big into agriculture and soil regeneration. And I think he actually has a product that you can buy. It's like something to do with folic acid. But I've listened to him on some podcasts, and basically the long and short of it, of what he's kind of figuring out, is that the soil is dead. Like, the soil that we're using to grow our food is no good most of the time. And it's beyond just like, oh, you got to get organic or whatever. He's like, no, even the organic food most of the time isn't great because of just the farmers he's like, the farmers don't know how to take care of their animals and their food. No one ever taught them, for the most part. He's like, so it's all about, lately what I've been doing is, ever since kind of getting into this, is just going local, you know, making relationships with local farmers or going to the local butcher store. That for me has changed my health dramatically. Just instead of getting my meat from Walmart, just driving 5 miles further and getting it from the butcher. And it's night and day. It's absolutely incredible. Like, as soon as you have a grass-fed local steak versus the steak at Walmart, it's a different animal, basically. And like, you can just taste it, that this stuff is better. And I love what you said, that it's simple. You know, people know what you're supposed to eat. We all know what we're supposed to do at the end of the day. You know that if you're eating steak and potatoes every day, and it's a grass-fed steak and it's some good potatoes, that's probably going to be better than Sonic or Wendy's or, like you said, a box of Cheerios. Like it's just common sense. But why do you think it's so hard for people to do? Like, what is the thing that people need to like switch in their heads that gets them to say like, okay, I'm going to do the thing that I'm supposed to be doing? Like, what do you think people need to kind of switch mentally?
One of the things that makes it hard, look at the advertising. I mean, they spend millions of dollars to get you to come to McDonald's or to go to your local fast food place. You know, they're constantly bombarding you. And that now it seems more than food, they're bombarding you with, if you get sick, just take this drug. I mean, the drug companies are, so you really have to just change your mindset. If you really want to change, you have to write down what it is that you want. And then why you want it. Not so much how are you going to do it, but why you want it. You know, and I have to respond to something you said about Walmart. When I was in Washington, I went to Walmart, you know, because my mom goes there. So I went with her and we're looking in the meat thing and they had grass-fed beef. And so I bought some ground beef that said grass-fed. Now, when I get grass-fed beef, ground beef from the guy that I get it from, who has a farm up in Northern California, who serves at the farmers markets locally, when I cut open that pound of beef, I split it into thirds, and it easily lasts me 5 days. If I want to skip a day, I cut that one open. By the third day, I mean, it was starting to smell, the color changed. I mean, it just, the quality of their stuff is not the same as you getting somebody local. If you can get local grass-fed versus going there, just it's a huge difference. But getting back to your question, just write down what it is you want and why you want it, and put that out into the universe, and all of a sudden you'll start attracting it to you. And don't beat yourself up when you know, I think I say this in my book, and I may have said it elsewhere. Don't shit on yourself. Oh, I know I shouldn't have eaten this. Look, what's done is done. It makes you feel bad. If I tell you, hey, Paul, you shouldn't have said that to me, makes you feel bad. So when you say it about yourself, you feel bad. You made your decision. What are you going to do next? What about your next meal? What about tomorrow? Who cares what you've done? You did it to learn from. Move on. Forgive yourself. Tell yourself that you love yourself and go to the next thing.
Man, I absolutely love that. That is so true. I think, man, that was just a mic drop. I don't have any comment on what you said. Mic drop. Richard, we got about 6 minutes and then I've got to run. So I want to ask you this final question. Tell us about your book. Tell us about like what made you want to write a book about, you know, how jiu-jitsu saved your life. Tell us about Worth Defending. Tell us, like, if someone's listening to this, like what's going on with this book, man?
One of the things about my teaching that I've been doing for years, because of my personal experiences and being around Rorion for so long and being taught privately for him, is that he was a storyteller. So when I taught my classes, you know, I'd go in and I'd show a move and I'd go, yeah, as a matter of fact, Grandmaster Helio Gracie showed me this move. And then I'll go into a whole story about 2 or 3 minutes before I even show him the move. And so as a result of that, I love, you know what? Oh yeah. So as I started telling more stories, you know, people would say, you know, you should really write a book. You should really write a book. For years they said this, and I went, yeah, I should. Because I thought of myself, I'm not a writer. There's no way I can sit down, go in front of my computer and start typing stuff. And then someone said, well, just get a recorder and do it. And I said, you don't understand my brain. I said, I'll start talking. And if there's no one there to give me feedback or to ask me a question, I'm just going to go, yeah, I started jiu-jitsu and I had a class with Rorion and went home. You know, it's like, so people kept saying, and then, you know, and more, I kept hearing the same thing. Richard, you should write a book. And one of my friends who was a student, he started with me in 06, who's now a black belt. His name is Chris Gores, super nice guy. He says, you know, Richard, you should really write a book. You know, I'm talking to him. And I said, yeah. And then he comes back to me. And I said, yeah, I should. And he goes, no, Richard. He said, you should really write a book. And I was like, whoa, dude. You know, and it just kind of made me, okay. So I started talking to this, I don't know how I met this one black belt in the East. He was in the Midwest. We started doing some telephone interviews, but our energies didn't jive together. So then one of my students says, you know, Richard, she goes, I have a little writing experience. She goes, I live locally, come over to my house and we'll just, so I go over there, she'd sit with her laptop, record me and touch type. As she's talking to me, she'd be like typing, asking me questions. So I got over there around 10 or 15 times. We had a lot of content, but it kind of started to go stale because you have to be a creative writer. So she also put down as a title for the book, something like called Get in My Guard. I didn't really like the title. So
I'm with you on that. I like Worth Defending a lot more.
So I went on Facebook and I said, look, I'm writing a book looking for a title. Scott Burr answers and he says, you know, I can help you with that. You know, suggesting titles. And he goes, also, I have some writing experience. So I sent Scott everything, the transcripts that we had with her. And then we did another series of maybe 12 hours minimum of interviews going over it again. And he kept telling me, man, you got a good book here. You got a good book here. And I'm thinking, yeah, maybe, you know, maybe I do. And all of a sudden, the book comes to life. You know, a couple of years ago, he sends me the first transcript. And you know what? I went through such stress during that summer because my mom fell down and broke her hip. We moved her to Washington. It was, you know, and this was COVID. I couldn't see my mom for a month. My mom's in her,
Damn.
you know, she's 94 at the time. She falls down. I can't see her. I'm stressed out. And then we drive to Washington in a motorhome with my mom, who's 2 months out of the hospital. And Scott sends me, and he says, read this and get back to me. It took me 3 months to read it. My brain, I was so stressed out, I couldn't do it. And he kept telling me, he says, Richard, what is your book?
It's resistance.
And I went, go ahead.
I said, it's resistance. Always happens.
Yeah. So I said, look, he said, you want it to come out in the fall. And I said, if it doesn't come out in the fall, it'll come out in the winter. If it doesn't come out in the winter, it'll come out in the spring. You know, so I finally sat down and read it. And I'm going, damn, this is a good book. You know, and then it's, you know, I sent back to him and then we kind of touched some things, you know, polished some things. And then the book came out and the feedback has been amazing. I mean, I've gotten feedback from more black belts than I thought were possible. Just people that say, oh man, I thought you were talking to me. You know, it was, I could relate to it. I mean, I can't tell you, I got a message, I get messages almost daily. This guy said, man, you got my fire going again for jiu-jitsu. You know, when I've taught seminars, people are like, I was ready to quit. And he said, after you came and you taught, so the book or the teaching, it just brought it back because of what I bring to the table. Because I think most people that do jiu-jitsu are hobbyists. They're not world champions.
That's so true.
So all of a sudden the book is born and I'm getting great feedback and I'm more proud of this book than it's amazing. And it's really opened doors for me too.
Man, Richard, that is I'm gonna have to get this book now. I've got an Audible credit.
I'll send you the book.
Oh, well, thank you, man.
Email me about Pat Miletich and send your address.
Okay, I will. And man, Richard, I think that we could talk all day, but let's do a part 2 sometime, because Zoom is literally about to kick us off. And
Okay,
hey, if you're listening to this, go check out Richard's book. It's called Worth Defending. I'm going to put the link down below. So if you're listening, just go check out the description and you can check it out. It's on Amazon. And I'm going to put
go to richardbresler.com.
richardbresler.com. Okay.
Yeah, with 1 S.
Okay. I'm going to throw the link down below. So if you're listening, go click the link and get the book. And this is your call to action. But Richard, thank you, man. This has been an honor.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.